What's up everybody, Maran here, and I've been driving the 2023 Dodge Hornet GT for an entire week here, and I have all kinds of updated impressions to provide here. So I did drive one for a day on the launch event a few months back, and was overall pretty impressed with it. It wasn't perfect, I did have a few little gripes, but it wasn't too bad. Now living with it for a week, it still has the same highlights where, you know, this is really going after the person who wants to have the fastest crossover around $30,000 in the segment. This is the fastest and it has the most horsepower. It's down on torque compared to the CX-30 Turbo, but nevertheless, you know, most horsepower in the segment, that's the bragging right here that this has. And, you know, the performance doesn't disappoint as far as, you know, it's a lot of punch when you put your foot down. You know, it's a nice strong amount of power, although it does like to torque steer a little bit every once in a while, even though it's all-wheel drive still. So definitely a front-wheel drive bias system that's maybe a little slow to react. But, you know, so handling's good. You know, it's really sporty and has good power. And so if you're someone who's okay with something that's a little bit rougher edged like that, this should be okay. But I do have a lot of complaints after having this thing for a week that have kind of soured my perspective on it just a little bit. So, first off, as far as the throttle mapping, I've been kind of annoyed all week with this 9-speed automatic. It's really like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of transmission where I'm trying to just be smooth with my acceleration and it's either giving me too little response or too much power. And so there's times where I'm like, now, like I'm putting my foot down, where's the downshift? There's the downshift, now we're flying. And so it's like this like extreme thing. And actually the perfect illustration of this is when I was trying to film these rolling shots that you're seeing there. So I'm trying to keep up with the camera car there, trying to keep pace, and that means getting back on and off the gas a lot to modulate my speed, you know, ever so slightly there. And I couldn't do that smoothly. It was constantly back and forth with, you know, being a little bit too much power, a little bit too little power. And it could never figure out what I wanted to do. And it was just kind of annoying, you know, and it was even when I'm driving the family around and stuff too, I'm trying to be smooth. I'm not trying to race around, and it's still just like back and forth. And the transmission also isn't the smoothest just in general, even whenever it is doing what I want it to do. You know, especially whenever it's cold, it's pretty rough whenever you're starting out, and it's just, the shifts just aren't smooth all the time anyway, even whenever it does give you a shift. And just the transmission to me was just not great, and combined with the throttle tuning and the way that they've mapped this transmission as far as when it downshifts and when it doesn't, just way too relaxed here in the normal mode. The electronics were also a little buggy in my week with the Hornet here as well. So one time when I was driving through a downpour, the automatic emergency braking sensor just completely said it was unavailable and couldn't work anymore, and it was just rain. I've heard of those systems having issues if it gets blocked with snow or something like that, but it was just getting washed off by rain, and that was enough for it to be like, nope, sorry, you're not having any automatic emergency braking anymore, which would also mean you wouldn't have any adaptive cruise in a heavy downpour either. Now, this is an early production or maybe even a pre-production one, so that is something I'm willing to say could potentially be something that gets worked out with the production vehicles, or, you know, after a few little revisions, maybe second model year or something like that. These could be teething issues. But nevertheless, you know, it had that glitch. It also, this has the tech package, which is supposed to give you intelligent speed sign assist, where it gives you the speed limits. Not a hard thing to master. It's been around in cars for, you know, a good long while now. And this one is rarely right. It's so funny. First off, it reverts back to its European ways, since this is, you know, based on the Alfa Romeo Tonale. Almost every time I started this vehicle up, it immediately gave me an 18 mile per hour speed, circular speed sign. We don't have circular speed signs here in the States, and so it just kept going back to those European speed signs. And there's several times where even when I was driving, for some reason it thought that it saw some random European speed sign out there somewhere, but it did not. And even whenever it did detect speed limit signs for the normal rectangular US version, you know, it still sometimes would be wrong. And driving through my own neighborhood, which has a, you know, a 15 or 25 mile per hour speed limit, it was saying it's a 30 mile per hour zone. I'm like, no, it isn't. Not sure where you're getting that from. There's no signs that say that around here. So, and that package, by the way, is like $2,000. It gives you a 360 camera and a couple other things. Definitely wouldn't bother with that package, considering it wasn't very useful, and you know, all the tech ended up, you know, being glitchy all week anyway. The last little driving thing I'll mention is that the suspension is kind of stiff. Now this one has the track package, which is $3,000, and I also would skip that package as well. I'll get more into pricing here in a minute, but I would skip that. But this one has it anyway, and you know, like I mentioned on my first drive, there's really not much difference as far as the dampers feeling and how stiff the ride is, whether you're in sport or normal mode, even though it's a 2-mode damper. Couldn't really tell much of a difference. It's pretty stiff in both settings, and so that's going to come down to, again, how hardcore you want this thing to feel every day. But to me, the ride was a little stiff, and it doesn't have to be that way. The CX-30 Turbo handles great as well, but has a much more comfortable and softer ride. So to me, just overly stiff for the ride for some reason, and that's also combined with these seats that are pretty stiff. And they were okay on the first drive, and they're okay again if you are an enthusiast that likes sportier stuff. That's fine, but for a mass market vehicle, these seats are just a little too stiff for the average buyer, I think. And I personally just found myself being like, this isn't very comfortable driving around all week with these seats. I mean, they're okay. I'm talking about first world problems here, but it was just a little underwhelming. And of course, with the track package, you also get this Alcantara, which means you lose the cooling function and you lose the panoramic moonroof. Both of those things are very nice to have. It's really dark in here without that glass roof, and the cooling would have been certainly appreciated here in the summer. And you pay $3,000 for this track package, which I think is kind of overkill and unnecessary to begin with, and then you lose out on 2 really valuable features, in my opinion, whenever you go for that as well. So basically, this vehicle is just spec'd exactly the opposite of what I would personally spec one, and how I think is a good way to spec one. I think this is it's kind of crazy with the way they have the options on this one. But anyway, other interior complaints. I'll be brief with these here. So first off, the button in the hatch for the back to close it, I always had to hit it like 3 times in order for it to finally register that I actually wanted to close the hatch. Another little glitchy thing. Hopefully that's just early production stuff, but nonetheless an issue that annoyed me during this week getting back into that hatch there. Also, I still don't like the design of that rear door. Every time I went to go open that back door, I always had to keep in mind, like, I gotta keep my head out of the way, because this huge piece of glass and metal there is like trying to smack you in the face every time you open that back door. Don't like the design of that whatsoever, and it's even my wife almost smacked her head on it once. It's not, I just don't know why they thought that was a good idea. Also, Apple CarPlay was a little bit buggy here this week. Sometimes it would connect, most of the time it would, but there's a few times where I had to manually tell it, like, hey, you need to connect now, and then it was like, oh, okay, here's your CarPlay. It's fine. It's not my worst wireless CarPlay experience I've tested, in the past year or so, but it's certainly not the best either. And so just another one of those things where this whole vehicle just felt a little glitchy and a little underbaked, at least here in my week. And my last 2 little minor complaints here are that the A-pillar is a little thick, and combined with the side mirror being right at the A-pillar there, that whole area, just something I had to peer around every once in a while. And the last little silly thing, just because of this color being this yellowy color, means that it attracted a ton of bugs. And I'd come out to this thing and it'd be parked for a little while, and there would just be all these flies and stuff just attracted to it just because of the color. So obviously that's an easy thing to fix. Get a different color, unless you really love this color, but just keep in mind it will be attracting bugs. Now, I don't want to say it's all negative though here, because a couple other little positive things I have to say. First off, it fits a car seat great in the back, and so it's one of the perks of this being one of the larger subcompact crossovers in this segment. You have a decent amount of back seat space. I actually was able to manage to squeeze 3 people in that back seat, including the car seat there and then 2 adults. So it's actually reasonably spacious, and I think that is one certain leg up that this has over the CX-30, is that you do have a little bit more rear leg room, a little bit more headroom. Feels a little less cramped in here than the CX-30, and so I think that is certainly a nice perk here. And so even with that car seat installed there though, I was able to sit in the front seat here and still have some leg room, which isn't always a guarantee in vehicles in this segment. So I think they did a great job with the sizing of it for sure. Another highlight for me was the fuel economy here. So it's rated at 21 mpg in the city, 29 on the highway, and 24 combined. So it's not one of the best fuel economy things in this segment, but again, it has the most power in its segment. So fuel economy is never a top priority, but I'm just happy to say that it is actually performing better than I was expecting. So with my driving, which was mostly around town driving, I didn't really do hardly any highway driving, but even still, my fuel economy here has been 22.6 mpg over my week. So I'm actually beating that city rating by 1.5 mpg here, even though I was mostly doing around town city kind of suburban driving. So I'm just really happy with that average, to be perfectly honest. And again, it's nothing amazing, and something this small with a turbo 4 to only be getting a couple mpg better than some larger engine vehicles, it's not remarkable, but I'm just happy to say that it does overperform those estimates, at least in my experience here. The last thing though to mention here is the pricing and how it compares to its 1 or 2 competitors basically these days. So as far as the pricing, they have raised the price by about $700 since I did my first review. With Destination, you're looking around a little over $32,000 for one of these to start. And I still think at that price point, there's a case to be made. Now, I still, I think at those price levels, you get cloth seats and you have a little bit of a less impressive interior. And the CX-30 Turbo gives you leather at that price point, gives you some of the features that you don't get here in this at that price point. And again, the CX-30 has a smoother ride. It's not glitchy. It has more torque as well, and a better transmission with that 6-speed auto. Just being a normal automatic that does what you want it to do most of the time. And so, I think that, if you like the little bit of extra horsepower you get in this, or you like the extra space of this, or you like the tech in this, because, you don't have, a touchscreen in the CX-30 that has a controller wheel, which is a little bit annoying for some people. This has a nice, easy touchscreen. You have the digital gauges, which are bigger than the gauges you get in the CX-30. So there are a few advantages here to this, and I think that these do still make sense when you're going for those base trims, or even if you go for the Plus version, gives you the heated and cooled seats, the moonroof. Those are, $36,500, $37,000 if you get anything other than white or black for the exterior. I think there's still a case to be made for that. And I think if it's a personal preference thing between this and the CX-30 for those reasons I mentioned, I'd say they're both equally good choices. We will see long-term reliability. Mazda is one of the top as far as reliability goes. This being based on Alfa Romeo, I think their reliability concerns are overblown by most people, but I don't think that they're as solid as Mazda either. So that's another thing to just throw out there and keep in mind if you are planning on keeping one of these a long time. One other thing that I mention about these is that, I just would say to stay away from the options list. The blacktop package, which strangely doesn't even include a black top. It's just black badges, black wheels, and I think that's about it. And that's, like $2,000. This tech package, which I think is borderline useless at this point in time, at least with how glitchy it is currently, that's another like $2,200 or something. Get rid of that. The track package, I think, is overkill. You don't need Brembos or something like this, I don't think. That, I'd get rid of that for $3,000. And so, I think that if you strip away all the packages that are, kind of silly in my opinion, and have one of these, even a really nice one at, 36.5, 37, that makes sense. 33 for a base one, is justifiable, again, depending on how you feel about the CX-30. The only other competitor, if you can find one and you're watching this here in 2023, if you can hunt down one of the last Kona Ns, they are a ton more fun for, a similar amount of money, and actually a little bit less money, I'd say, in most cases. So, that's another one. If you can grab one this year, great. But otherwise, they're going away. They're not coming back with the new next generation Kona, it seems. So CX-30 Turbo is the only other game in town as far as street-focused stuff. You have the Bronco Sport, which has 250 horsepower as well, but that's kind of more off-road focused. Doesn't have the good handling this does or anything. So, this does have a unique niche for itself. But I still think that if it were my money, I'd go CX-30 Turbo, unless you need that slightly more spacious back seat, the touchscreen, or one or two other things. But I really think this is a strong runner-up, but to me, CX-30 Turbo still takes the cake in my mind as far as the best subcompact crossover that's sporty and actually has a lot of power. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Hornet. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Dodge for providing me here with the Hornet to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.